The snow fell in thick curtains across the Sierra Nevada foothills, turning the world into a frozen nightmare that no one in Stockton, California, had seen coming in December of 1875. Rebecca Lancaster stumbled through drifts that reached her knees, her thin cotton dress soaked through and clinging to her trembling body like ice against skin. And she knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die out here in this white wilderness, alone and forgotten by everyone who had ever pretended to care. Her feet had gone numb an hour ago, maybe two. She had lost track of time when the sun disappeared behind the storm clouds. The wedding ring she had thrown into the snow 3 miles back near the broken-down stagecoach was probably already buried, just like her hope. Rebecca collapsed against a pine tree, bark scraping her palms as she slid down into the snow, and the tears came hot and fast, streaming down her frozen cheeks. She had left St. Louis with such dreams, answering a letter from a man who promised her a life of comfort and respect as his wife, only to discover upon arrival that Thomas Garrett was not the respectable merchant he claimed to be, but a con artist, who already had 2 wives hidden in different towns and a gambling debt that made him desperate enough to try selling her to the highest bidder at a saloon in Sacramento. She had run, stolen away in the night on a northbound stage, and now the stage driver was dead from the cold, the horses had broken free and vanished into the blizzard, and she was utterly alone. "Please," Rebecca whispered to the empty air, to God, to anyone who might listen. "Please, I cannot do this anymore." The wind howled in response, mocking her plea, and she closed her eyes against the sting of snow and tears. This was how it ended then, frozen in the wilderness, 22 years old with nothing to show for her life but mistakes and broken promises. Her mother had warned her about answering advertisements from Western men, but Rebecca had been so certain that adventure and love waited somewhere beyond the suffocating parlors of Missouri. What a fool she had been! She did not hear the horse approaching until it was almost upon her, the sound muffled by snow and wind. When she opened her eyes, a figure on horseback materialized through the white curtain like something from a fever dream. The rider was tall in the saddle, bundled in a heavy sheepskin coat with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, and he brought his horse to a stop just feet from where she huddled against the tree. "Madam." The voice was deep and concerned, unmistakably masculine. "Madam, what in God's name are you doing out here?" Rebecca tried to answer, but her teeth chattered so violently that words would not form. She stared up at him, this stranger who had appeared from nowhere, and fresh tears spilled down her face. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots crunching in the snow as he approached. He crouched down beside her, and she could see his face now under the shadow of his hat, strong features weathered by sun and wind, dark eyes that widened with alarm as he took in her condition. "You are half frozen," he said, already shrugging out of his coat. "Can you stand?" "And no hope," Rebecca managed through her chattering teeth. "No hope left." He wrapped the heavy coat around her shoulders, the warmth of it shocking against her frozen skin. Then he did something unexpected. He took her face gently between his gloved hands, forcing her to meet his eyes, and spoke with an intensity that cut through her despair. "Hope starts here," he said firmly. "Right here, right now. I am not leaving you to die in this storm, you hear me? Hope starts here." Something in his voice, in the absolute conviction of those words, pierced through the fog of cold and fear that had consumed her. Rebecca found herself nodding, found herself letting him lift her to her feet even though her legs barely supported her weight. He was strong, this stranger, and he held her steady with one arm while managing his horse's reins with the other. "I am going to put you on my horse," he said. "Then I am going to get you somewhere warm. Can you hold on?" "I will try," Rebecca whispered. He lifted her into the saddle with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her, pulling her back against his chest and wrapping one arm securely around her waist. She felt the solid warmth of him through her wet dress, felt the steady beat of his heart against her shoulder blade, and for the first time in hours, she dared to believe she might survive this. "What is your name?" he asked as he urged the horse forward into the storm. "Rebecca Lancaster." "Samuel Delaney," he replied. "I run a ranch about 2 miles north of here. We will have you warm and dry before you know it." Rebecca wanted to ask him what he was doing out in this blizzard, how he had found her, whether he was an angel or just extraordinarily lucky. But the cold was still pulling at her consciousness, dragging her down into darkness. She felt Samuel's arm tighten around her. "Stay with me, Rebecca," he said urgently. "Keep talking. Tell me how you ended up out here." "Stagecoach," she managed. "Driver died. Horses ran. Jesus." His voice was grim. "You were on the Sacramento stage." "Yes." "Anyone else with you?" "No, just me and the driver." Samuel was quiet for a moment, and she felt the tension in his body. "We will send someone back for him when this storm breaks. Right now, I need to get you inside." The ride felt both endless and impossibly short. Rebecca drifted in and out of awareness, conscious only of Samuel's warmth at her back and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them. When they finally stopped, she opened her eyes to see a sprawling ranch house emerging from the snow, lamplight glowing yellow in the windows. "Thank God," Samuel muttered. He dismounted and pulled her down into his arms, carrying her like she weighed nothing at all. "Henry," he shouted toward the house. "Henry, get the door." The front door flew open and a gray-haired man appeared, his weathered face registering shock. "Boss, what found her half-frozen 3 miles south?" Samuel said, brushing past him into the blessed warmth of the house. "Get blankets and heat water for tea, and fetch Maria, we need dry clothes." Rebecca found herself being carried through a comfortably furnished main room with a massive stone fireplace, down a hallway, and into a bedroom where Samuel laid her carefully on a quilt-covered bed. The warmth of the room made her skin prickle painfully as sensation began returning to her extremities. "This is going to hurt," Samuel said gently, kneeling beside the bed. "Getting warm again always does, but you are safe now, I promise you that." A Mexican woman with kind eyes and graying hair hurried into the room, her arms full of blankets and what looked like a flannel nightgown. She spoke rapidly in Spanish to Samuel, who nodded and stood. "Maria is going to help you out of those wet clothes," he said to Rebecca. "I will be just outside if you need anything." As he left, closing the door behind him, Maria began fussing over Rebecca with the efficiency of someone well-practiced in caring for others. She helped Rebecca out of the sodden dress, clucking her tongue at the state of her undergarments, and wrapped her in a thick towel before guiding the warm nightgown over her head. Then came the blankets, layer upon layer, until Rebecca felt cocooned in warmth. "Pobrecita," Maria murmured, brushing Rebecca's wet hair back from her face. "What you must have been through." Tears welled up again, unexpected and overwhelming. "I thought I was going to die." "But you did not," Maria said firmly, her accent thick but her English clear. "God sent Señor Samuel to find you, and now you are safe. You drink this tea and rest, understand?" Samuel returned a few minutes later carrying a steaming mug, which he placed carefully in Rebecca's trembling hands. The tea was sweet and strong, and it burned going down in the most wonderful way. "Thank you," Rebecca said, meeting his eyes over the rim of the cup. "You saved my life." Samuel pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, his expression serious. "What I said out there in the snow, I meant it. Hope starts here in this moment. Whatever you were running from, whatever brought you to be alone on that stage in the middle of a blizzard, You have got a chance now to start fresh." "You do not even know me," Rebecca said wonderingly. "I could be anyone." "A criminal, eh? You are a woman who was in trouble and needed help," Samuel interrupted. "That is all I need to know right now. The rest, well, we will figure that out when you are recovered." He paused, studying her face. "Although I would appreciate knowing if someone is going to come looking for you. A husband, maybe?" "No husband," Rebecca said quickly. "I was supposed to marry a man in Sacramento, a man I had been corresponding with for 6 months, but when I arrived, I discovered he had lied about everything. He was not a merchant, he was a gambler and a fraud, and he already had other wives. He tried to sell me to pay his debts." The words tumbled out in a rush, and she realized how good it felt to tell someone the truth. "I ran. I got on that stage heading away from Sacramento, and I did not even know where I was going. I just needed to escape." Samuel's jaw tightened, anger flickering in his dark eyes. "This man, Thomas Garrett, by any chance?" Rebecca stared at him in shock. "How did you know?" "Because he tried the same scheme last year on a friend's cousin. She was smart enough to send a telegram before she met him in person, and her family came out to collect her." Samuel stood and paced to the window, looking out at the storm. "He has been running that con for years, advertising in Eastern newspapers for mail-order brides, then either abandoning them or worse. The law has been trying to catch up with him, but he moves around too much." "I was such a fool," Rebecca whispered. "No." Samuel turned back to face her, his expression fierce. "You were brave enough to want something more than what you had. You were brave enough to come west and chase a dream. That he was a lying bastard does not make you a fool, it makes him a criminal." He came back to the bedside, his voice gentling. "You are safe here, Rebecca. You can stay as long as you need to recover and figure out your next step. I give you my word on that." Rebecca looked at this man who had appeared out of a blizzard like an answer to a prayer she had not even finished praying, and felt something unfamiliar stir in her chest. Not just gratitude, though she felt that in abundance, but something warmer and more dangerous. Hope, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Because 5 years ago my younger sister ran off with a man who promised her the world. By the time I found her, she was sick and broken and had nowhere else to turn. She died 3 months later from pneumonia, but what really killed her was giving up hope." His voice roughened with old grief. "I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way I wished someone had helped her, I would take it. So here we are." "I am sorry about your sister," Rebecca said softly. "So am I." Samuel cleared his throat and straightened his shoulders. "But that is enough heavy talk for tonight. You need rest. Sleep as long as you want tomorrow. When you wake up, Maria will have food ready and we can talk more about what comes next." He moved toward the door, but Rebecca called out, "Samuel." He turned back. "Yes. Hope starts here," she repeated his words from the snow. "Thank you for giving me that." His face softened into something that might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell in the lamplight. "Get some rest, Rebecca Lancaster. Tomorrow is going to be better than today, I promise you that." After he left, Rebecca sank back into the pillows and pulled the blankets up to her chin. The room was warm, the bed was soft, and for the first time since leaving St. Louis, she felt safe. As her eyes drifted closed, she thought about the man who had saved her, about his strong hands and his dark eyes and the conviction in his voice when he told her hope started here. Maybe, just maybe, he was right. She slept deeply, dreamlessly, and when she woke, the storm had passed and pale winter sunlight streamed through the window. Rebecca lay still for a moment, taking inventory of her body. Her muscles ached, her fingers and toes tingled with the after-effects of frostbite, but she was alive and warm and safe. She sat up slowly, pushing the blankets aside, and noticed someone had left clothes folded on a chair near the bed. A simple wool dress in dark blue, stockings, and sturdy boots. A knock sounded at the door. "Miss Rebecca," Maria's voice called. "Are you awake?" "Yes, come in." Maria entered with a breakfast tray laden with eggs, toast, bacon, and hot coffee. The smell made Rebecca's stomach growl audibly. "Dios mío, you are hungry, this is good. Hungry means healing." She set the tray on Rebecca's lap and fussed with the pillows behind her back. "Señor Samuel, he has been up since before dawn checking on the animals and clearing paths in the snow. He said to let you sleep as long as you need." "How long did I sleep?" 14 hours, maybe more." Maria smiled. "Your body needed it." Rebecca ate ravenously, barely tasting the food in her hunger. When she finished, Maria helped her dress in the borrowed clothes, which fit reasonably well though the dress was a bit loose in the waist. The boots were lined with sheepskin and gloriously warm. "Whose clothes are these?" Rebecca asked. Maria's expression grew sad. "They were Miss Caroline's, Señor Samuel's sister. She was about your size. He said she would want someone to have use of them." Rebecca touched the soft wool of the dress, thinking about the sister who had died, about how much Samuel must have loved her to keep her things all this time. "I will take good care of them." "I know you will, Mija." Maria patted her arm. "Come, let me show you the house, and then you can find Señor Samuel if you like." The ranch house was larger than it had seemed in last night's emergency, with solid furniture and colorful woven rugs that gave it warmth despite its rustic construction. Maria explained that Samuel had built it 6 years ago when he first claimed the land, gradually expanding as the ranch grew. He ran cattle primarily, with some horses, and employed 4 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse across the yard. Henry, the gray-haired man from last night, was the foreman and had been with Samuel since the beginning. Rebecca found Samuel in the barn, mucking out stalls with efficient, practiced movements. He looked up when he heard her approach, and something in his expression shifted, became almost soft. "You are up," he said, leaning on the pitchfork. "How are you feeling?" "Sore, but alive, thanks to you." Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly shy. "Maria said I slept 14 hours. Your body needed it." He stuck the pitchfork in a pile of hay and came closer. "I sent Henry and one of the hands out at first light to find the stagecoach. They brought the driver's body back. We will bury him properly once the ground thaws a bit." Rebecca felt a pang of guilt. "I did not even know his name." "Walter Sims. He was a good man, drove that route for 10 years. Samuel's voice was respectful. "He would be glad to know you survived." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of Walter Sims' death hanging between them. Then Samuel seemed to shake himself. "Listen, I meant what I said last night. You are welcome to stay here as long as you need. I know you do not have anywhere else to go right now, and I will not turn you out until you are ready." "I cannot stay here indefinitely," Rebecca protested. "It would not be proper, and I need to find work, need to be able to support myself. Maria could use help around the house," Samuel interrupted. "She has been running herself ragged trying to keep this place clean and cook for all of us. If you wanted to help her, I would consider that more than fair exchange for room and board." Rebecca considered this. It was not charity, not exactly, if she was working for her keep. And the truth was she had no money, no prospects, nowhere else to turn. "You are certain Maria would not mind?" "I am certain she would be delighted. She has been after me to hire household help for months." Samuel smiled, and Rebecca felt her heart skip in her chest. He was handsome when he smiled, the hard lines of his face softening into something almost boyish. "What do you say? At least stay through the winter. Come spring, if you want to move on to Stockton or Sacramento or wherever, I will help you get there." "All right," Rebecca said, making the decision. through the winter, but I pay my own way through work. Deal." Samuel held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Rebecca shook it. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip strong but careful, and the touch sent an unexpected warmth racing up her arm. Over the following weeks, Rebecca settled into life at the Delaney ranch. She woke early each morning to help Maria prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, then spent her days cleaning, mending, baking, and learning all the skills necessary to keep a working ranch house running smoothly. Maria was a patient teacher, showing her how to make tortillas from scratch, how to get bloodstains out of work shirts, how to preserve vegetables and fruits for the long winter months. The work was hard, harder than anything Rebecca had done in her comfortable middle-class life back in St. Louis, but it was also strangely satisfying. She went to bed each night with aching muscles and calloused hands, but also with a sense of accomplishment she had never felt before. She was useful here. She mattered, and there was Samuel. He was a presence that filled every corner of her awareness, even when he was out on the range with his cattle or breaking horses in the corral. He was unfailingly polite to her, respectful, but Rebecca caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she could not quite read. Curiosity, maybe. Or something warmer. She found herself watching him too, noticing things. The way he was always the first one up in the morning and the last to bed at night. The way he treated his ranch hands with firm fairness, expecting hard work, but never asking them to do anything he would not do himself. The way he was endlessly patient with the animals, even the most stubborn horse or skittish calf. The way he checked on her every evening, asking about her day, making sure she had everything she needed. One evening in late January, Rebecca was sitting by the fire mending one of Samuel's shirts when he came in from evening chores, bringing a gust of cold air with him. "Getting colder out there," he said, hanging his coat by the door. "We might get more snow tonight." "I will make sure there is extra wood brought in," Rebecca said, threading her needle. Samuel came to stand near the fire, warming his hands. He watched her work for a moment, then said quietly, "You do not have to mend my clothes. That is not part of the arrangement." "I want to," Rebecca said, glancing up at him. "You have done so much for me, Samuel. Let me do this small thing." "Rebecca." He sat down in the chair across from her, his expression serious. "I need you to understand something. I did not bring you here expecting you to be grateful for the rest of your life. I brought you here because it was the right thing to do, because you needed help. You do not owe me anything." "I know that," Rebecca said softly, "but maybe I am not mending your shirt because I owe you. Maybe I am doing it because I want to, because you matter to me." She stopped, surprised by her own boldness, and felt heat rise to her cheeks. Samuel was very still, his dark eyes locked on her face. "Rebecca," he said again, and there was something in his voice that made her pulse race. "I need to be honest with you about something." "What is it?" "When I brought you here, I told myself I was just helping someone in need the way I wished someone had helped Caroline. But these past weeks, having you here, getting to know you." He paused, seeming to search for words. "You have become important to me, more important than I ever intended. And I know that is probably the last thing you want to hear after what you went through with Thomas Garrett, after being deceived by a man's promises. But I could not let another day pass without telling you the truth." Rebecca set down her mending, her hands trembling slightly. "What truth is that?" "That I am falling in love with you," Samuel said simply. "That every time you smile, my heart does something strange in my chest. That the thought of you leaving come spring makes me feel like I am losing something precious before I ever really had it." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I know you probably need time, need to heal from what happened to you. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. Rebecca stared at him, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Samuel, you do not have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I just wanted to be honest with you. I could not keep pretending this was just about helping someone in need anymore." "Let me finish," Rebecca said, and he fell silent, watching her with those dark, earnest eyes. She took a breath, gathering her courage. "When I was in that snow, when I thought I was going to die, I had given up completely. I believed that coming west was the biggest mistake of my life, that I should have stayed in St. Louis where at least I was safe, even if I was bored and lonely. But then you appeared and you said those words, 'Hope starts here,' and something in me woke back up." She stood and moved to kneel in front of his chair, taking his rough hands in hers. "These past weeks with you, I have felt more alive, more myself than I ever did back east. You make me want to be brave again, Samuel. You make me believe that good men exist, that hope is not just a word but something real and tangible." "Rebecca," he breathed, and she saw hope and fear warring in his expression. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, the words coming easier than she expected. "I did not want to, I was scared to, but I am. The way you care for everyone on this ranch, the way you talk about your sister with such love even though it hurts, the way you have treated me with nothing but respect and kindness from the moment you found me. How could I not fall in love with you?" Samuel made a sound low in his throat and pulled her up into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You mean that?" he asked roughly. "You really mean it?" "I mean it," Rebecca said, and then he was kissing her, his lips warm and sure against hers, and she was kissing him back with all the pent-up emotion of the past weeks. It was nothing like the clumsy, demanding kisses Thomas Garrett had forced on her in Sacramento. This was different, reverent, and passionate at once, a promise and a question all wrapped together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, I know you might need more time, but Rebecca, marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy, showing you what love should really be." Rebecca thought about everything she had been through to get to this moment, the lies and betrayals, the desperate flight through the snow, the certainty of death transformed into unexpected salvation. She thought about hope starting here in this place with this man, and she realized that sometimes the best decisions were the ones made with your heart instead of your head. "Yes," she said, smiling through sudden tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Samuel let out a whoop of joy and stood, lifting her with him and spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing. Maria appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion, and when Samuel told her the news, she clapped her hands together and started crying happy tears, blessing them in rapid Spanish. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Stockton, with Maria and Henry and the ranch hands as witnesses. Rebecca wore a simple white dress that Maria had helped her sew from fabric Samuel bought specially for the occasion. Samuel wore his best suit, looking both uncomfortable and impossibly handsome, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, he kissed her like it was the most natural thing in the world. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Rebecca moved her few belongings into Samuel's room, and every night she fell asleep in his arms, warm and safe and loved. He was a considerate husband, patient on their wedding night when she was nervous, making sure she felt cherished and desired in equal measure. They talked for hours in the darkness, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams for the future. Samuel told her about building the ranch from nothing, about his plans to expand the herd, maybe start breeding horses seriously. Rebecca told him about growing up in St. Louis, about her mother who had died when she was 17 and her father who had remarried within 6 months, leaving Rebecca feeling like an outsider in her own home. "Is that why you answered Thomas Garrett's advertisement?" Samuel asked one night, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "Partly," Rebecca admitted. "I just wanted to matter to someone again, to build something of my own. I thought marriage to a Western merchant would give me that." "You matter to me," Samuel said fiercely. "More than anything else in this world, and this ranch, this life, it is yours too now. We are building it together." As winter gave way to early spring, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel one morning in March as they sat together watching the sunrise from the porch, and he pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Rebecca asked, even though she could feel the answer in the way he held her. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Samuel said, pulling back to cup her face in his hands. "Rebecca, you have given me so much already. Hope, love, a reason to wake up smiling every morning, and now a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy was easier than Rebecca had feared, though Maria fussed over her constantly, making sure she ate enough and did not overexert herself. Samuel became even more protective, trying to do all the heavy work himself, until Rebecca had to gently remind him that she was pregnant, not made of glass. Still, there was something touching about his concern, the way he made sure she had extra pillows at night, the way he started building a cradle in the barn during his spare time. Their son was born on a warm October evening in 1876, after 12 hours of labor that left Rebecca exhausted, but exhilarated. Samuel stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragements that kept her going when she thought she could not push any more. When the baby finally slipped into the world with a lusty cry, Samuel cut the cord with trembling hands and then broke down crying himself as he held his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Samuel said, tears streaming down his face. "Rebecca, he is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, but called him Tommy, and he had Samuel's dark eyes and Rebecca's nose and a temperament that was surprisingly easy. He nursed well, slept in reasonable stretches, and seemed content to be passed around between his parents, Maria, and the ranch hands, all of whom doted on him shamelessly. Life settled into a new rhythm with Tommy in it. Rebecca learned to balance caring for an infant with her household duties, though Samuel insisted on hiring a young woman from Stockton to help Maria so that Rebecca would not be overwhelmed. The ranch continued to prosper, with good spring rains that year leading to fat cattle and healthy grass. Samuel bought more land, expanding their holdings, and hired 2 more ranch hands to help manage the growing herd. When Tommy was 6 months old, a letter arrived from St. Louis. Rebecca's father had tracked her down through the postmaster in Sacramento, having heard through some complicated chain of gossip that a woman matching her description had been involved in the Thomas Garrett scandal. The letter was stiff and formal, asking if she was all right, if she needed money or assistance. There was no apology for how he had treated her after remarrying, no acknowledgement of why she had left in the first place, but Rebecca supposed it was his way of extending an olive branch. She showed the letter to Samuel, unsure how to respond. He read it carefully, then handed it back to her. "What do you want to do?" "I do not know," Rebecca admitted. "Part of me wants to write back and tell him I am fine, better than fine. But another part is still angry at him for making me feel like I did not matter." "You matter," Samuel said firmly. "To me, to Tommy, to everyone on this ranch. Your father's failure to see that does not change the truth of it." He paused, then added, "But he is still your father. If you want a relationship with him, even a complicated one, I will support that. And if you want to leave the past in the past, I will support that too. Rebecca thought about it for several days, watching Tommy grow and change, helping Samuel with the spring roundup, planting a vegetable garden near the house. Finally, she wrote back to her father, a brief letter explaining that she was married to a good man, had a healthy son, and was building a life she loved in California. She did not invite him to visit, but she left the door open for future correspondence if he chose to pursue it. When she posted the letter in Stockton, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The past was the past. She had chosen her future, and it was here. That summer brought a drought, the worst Samuel had seen in his years ranching. The grass turned brown and brittle. The creek that ran through their property slowed to a trickle, and the cattle grew thin despite everyone's best efforts. Samuel worked himself to exhaustion trying to keep the herd alive, hauling water from town, moving cattle to whatever patches of green grass they could find. Rebecca watched him grow gaunt and tired, saw the worry lines deepen around his eyes, and did everything she could to support him. "We might have to sell off part of the herd," Samuel said one night, his voice heavy with defeat. "I do not have enough feed to get them all through to fall." "Then we sell part of the herd," Rebecca said practically. "We keep the best breeding stock and rebuild when the rains come back." "The ranch will survive, Samuel. We will survive." He looked at her with such love and gratitude that it made her chest ache. "How did I get so lucky to find you in that snow?" "I ask myself the same thing every day," Rebecca said, moving into his arms, "but I am not questioning it anymore. This is where I am supposed to be." They survived the drought, barely, by selling half the herd and using the money to buy feed for the rest. It was a hard blow financially, but Samuel was determined to rebuild. He started breeding horses more seriously, trading with the local Miwok tribe for hardy mountain ponies that could survive on less forage than cattle. It proved to be a smart decision. By the following year, he had a small string of tough, reliable horses that sold well to ranchers and farmers throughout the valley. Rebecca gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, in the spring of 1878. She was smaller than Tommy had been, more delicate, with Samuel's dark hair and Rebecca's green eyes. Tommy, now 2 years old, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding, though his help was more enthusiastic than effective. As the children grew, the ranch continued to expand. Samuel's horse breeding operation became well known throughout California, and buyers came from as far away as San Francisco to purchase his animals. He hired more hands, built a bigger barn, and finally convinced Rebecca to let him add on to the house, giving them a proper dining room and 2 more bedrooms upstairs. Life was good, busy, and sometimes exhausting, but deeply satisfying in ways Rebecca had never imagined possible during those desperate days in St. Louis. She had a husband who loved her completely, children who filled her days with joy and purpose, and a home she had helped build from nothing. Sometimes she thought about that moment in the snow when Samuel found her, when he had looked into her despairing eyes and said, "Hope starts here." And she marveled at how much could change in just a few years. When Tommy was 7 and Sarah was 5, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the first 2, with more sickness and fatigue, and Samuel worried constantly. He insisted she rest more, hired additional help for the house, and barely let her lift anything heavier than a teacup. Rebecca found his protectiveness alternately endearing and exasperating, but she could not deny it felt good to be so thoroughly cared for. Their third child, another boy they named James, was born in November of 1880 after a difficult labor that left Rebecca weak and Samuel terrified. But James proved to be a fighter, healthy and strong despite the hard birth. And within weeks, Rebecca was back on her feet, managing the household with her usual efficiency. The ranch continued to thrive through the 1880s. Samuel's reputation as a horseman spread, and he started receiving requests to break and train horses for other ranchers, which brought in good money during the slower winter months. Tommy grew into a serious boy who loved working with the animals, often trailing after his father during chores and asking endless questions. Sarah was more artistic, spending hours drawing pictures and making up elaborate stories. James, the baby, was pure mischief, always climbing things he should not or trying to ride horses far too big for him. Rebecca watched her children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness of how quickly time passed. It seemed like just yesterday she was holding Tommy as a newborn, and now he was helping his father with the spring roundup. Sarah had started learning to read, poring over the few books they owned with intense concentration. James was talking in full sentences, most of them getting him into trouble. One evening in the summer of 1884, Samuel and Rebecca sat on the porch together watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained throughout their marriage whenever possible. The children were asleep inside, the ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse, and for once everything was peaceful. "Do you ever think about that day I found you in the snow?" Samuel asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Sometimes," Rebecca admitted. "Usually when I am particularly happy, when I look around at this life we have built and cannot quite believe it is real." "It is real," Samuel said softly. "And it is ours. Every beautiful, difficult, wonderful bit of it." Rebecca leaned her head against his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, horse and leather and hard work. "You know what I think about most from that day?" "What?" "How close I came to giving up completely. If you had come along even an hour later, I would have been dead. But you appeared exactly when I needed you, and you gave me those words, 'Hope starts here,' and they saved me as much as the physical rescue did." She turned to look up at him. "You changed my entire life, Samuel. You gave me a reason to keep fighting, keep believing. I can never thank you enough for that. You thank me every day just by being here, by choosing me, by building this life with me," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you, Rebecca. More now than I did the day we married, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Rebecca said, reaching up to cup his face. "Because I feel the same way. I love you more every year, every day. You are the best man I have ever known." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold, and Rebecca thought about hope, about how it could be found in the most unexpected places, offered by strangers who became family, built into something permanent and beautiful through years of hard work and dedication and love. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the milestones of their children's lives. Tommy grew tall and strong, eventually taking over much of the daily ranch work as Samuel's joints began to ache with the first hints of age. Sarah surprised everyone by showing a talent for training horses that rivaled her father's, developing a gentle touch that even the most skittish animals responded to. James, true to his childhood nature, remained the wild one, always pushing boundaries and seeking adventure, though he had a good heart underneath the mischief. In 1888, when Tommy was 17, he announced his intention to court Hannah Porter, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Samuel and Rebecca gave their blessing, recognizing in the young couple the same kind of love that had brought them together. Tommy and Hannah married the following year, and Samuel helped them build a small house on the far corner of the ranch property, keeping the family close. Sarah, at 15, declared she had no interest in marriage, much to her mother's secret relief. "I want to raise horses, Mama," she said firmly. "Like Papa does. I do not need a husband for that." "You will change your mind eventually," Rebecca predicted, but she was secretly proud of her daughter's independence. James, at 13, was still trying to figure out who he was beyond the family's wild child. He had a quick mind when he bothered to apply it, and Rebecca suspected he would find his calling eventually, even if it was not ranching. In the spring of 1890, 15 years after Samuel had found Rebecca in the snow, they threw a party to celebrate their anniversary. The whole community came. Neighbors and friends and ranch hands past and present, filling the expanded house and spilling out into the yard. There was music and dancing and more food than any gathering needed, and Rebecca stood in the middle of it all feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. Samuel found her near the end of the evening, standing on the porch looking out at their land silvered by moonlight. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on top of her head. "Tired?" he asked. "Happy," Rebecca corrected. "Looking at all of this, everyone who came to celebrate with us, our children, our home, I just feel so incredibly blessed." "We earned this," Samuel said. "Every bit of it. We worked hard, loved each other through good times and bad, raised good kids. We earned this happiness, Rebecca." She turned in his arms to face him, seeing silver in his dark hair now, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. "Do you remember what you said to me that day in the snow? Hope starts here," Samuel quoted softly. "How could I forget? It was the truest thing I have ever said." "It was," Rebecca agreed. "You gave me hope when I had none left, and that hope became this life, this family, this love. Everything good in my world started the moment you found me." "Not the moment I found you," Samuel corrected gently. "The moment you chose to believe me, to trust me, to take my hand and let me help you. You could have refused, could have given up anyway, but you did not. You fought, Rebecca. You chose hope. That is what made all of this possible." Rebecca thought about that, about the choice she had made in that frozen wilderness to believe in the possibility of something better. Samuel had offered hope, but she had been the one who accepted it, who worked to make it real. Together they had built something neither could have created alone. "Thank you," she said, "for being the kind of man worth hoping for." Samuel kissed her then, sweet and tender and full of 15 years of love and commitment and partnership, and Rebecca felt the same flutter in her heart she had felt the first time he kissed her. Some things, she thought, never grew old. The 1890s brought more changes. Tommy and Hannah had their first child, making Samuel and Rebecca grandparents for the first time. Sarah, despite her earlier declarations, fell in love with a quiet veterinarian from Stockton who shared her passion for animals, and married him in a simple ceremony that somehow ended up being one of the most beautiful events Rebecca had ever witnessed. Even James eventually settled down, finding his calling as a teacher in the growing town of Stockton, something none of them had expected, but which suited him perfectly. The ranch continued to prosper, though Samuel gradually handed over more of the daily operations to Tommy as his body began to slow down. He was still strong for a man in his 50s, still active and engaged, but Rebecca noticed he tired more easily now, needed more rest between the heavy work. She was careful not to fuss over him, knowing he hated being coddled, but she made sure he ate well and got enough sleep, and did not push himself beyond reason. They were sitting together on the porch one evening in the summer of 1895, 20 years after that fateful day in the snow, when Samuel said thoughtfully, "You know, I used to think saving you was the best thing I ever did, but I was wrong about that." Rebecca looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean? Saving you was important, yes, but the best thing I ever did was loving you, building this life with you. That is my real legacy, not finding you in the snow, but everything that came after." He took her hand, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. "You made me a better man, Rebecca. You gave me purpose and joy and a reason to be thankful every single day. I want you to know that." Tears pricked at Rebecca's eyes. "Samuel, you gave me exactly the same things. I was so lost before I met you, so convinced that my life was over before it had really begun. You showed me what real love looks like, what partnership means. Every good thing in my life traces back to you." "To us," Samuel corrected. "To the choice we both made to believe in each other, to build something lasting." "To us," Rebecca agreed, raising his hand to her lips and kissing his rough knuckles. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in familiar shades of fire and gold. Rebecca thought about all the sunsets they had watched together over the years, all the quiet moments stolen from busy days, all the conversations and silences and everything in between. She thought about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch that had grown from Samuel's dream into their shared reality, about the life they had built from hope and hard work and unwavering love. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, Rebecca still thought about that younger version of herself, desperate and frozen in the snow, certain her life was ending. She wished she could go back and tell that terrified girl that everything would be all right, that a man on a horse was about to appear and change everything, that hope really could start in the darkest moment and grow into something more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. But then again, maybe not knowing the future had been part of what made the journey so meaningful. Maybe the uncertainty, the leap of faith required to trust Samuel, to believe in his words and his promise of safety. Maybe that was what made their love story real and earned rather than something simple and easy. As the years continued to unfold, as their grandchildren grew and the ranch evolved and life continued its steady rhythm of joy and sorrow, triumph and challenge, Rebecca never lost sight of where it all began. "Hope starts here," Samuel had said, and he had been absolutely right. Hope had started in that snow, in his words and his outstretched hand, and it had grown into this rich, full life that surrounded them now. By the turn of the century, Samuel was in his 60s and Rebecca in her late 40s, and they had 7 grandchildren between Tommy, Sarah, and James, with more on the way. The ranch was now one of the most successful horse breeding operations in Central California, known throughout the state for the quality of its animals and the integrity of its owners. Samuel had trained a generation of horsemen, passing on his knowledge and his patient approach to anyone willing to learn. Rebecca had become something of a matriarch to the community, the woman everyone came to for advice or comfort or just a listening ear. She kept the ranch house running smoothly, managed the increasingly complicated finances, and somehow always had time to welcome visitors, mentor young wives, and spoil her grandchildren appropriately. But despite all the responsibilities and the busy household and the constant flow of people needing their attention, Samuel and Rebecca never lost sight of what mattered most: each other. They still had their evening ritual of watching the sunset together. They still talked for hours about everything and nothing. They still kissed like newlyweds when they thought no one was watching. And they still, after 25 years of marriage, looked at each other with the same love and wonder that had marked those early days. One winter evening in 1900, when fresh snow had fallen on the ranch for the first time in years, Rebecca stood at the window watching the white flakes drift down and remembered. Samuel came up behind her, following her gaze. "Makes you think about it, does not it?" he said quietly. "That first snow." "Every time," Rebecca admitted. "How could it not? That snow almost killed me, and instead it brought me to you. It is hard not to see it as a symbol of everything that can change in a moment, for better or worse." Samuel turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Rebecca, you know I am getting older, we both are, and I need to tell you something while I still can say it clearly." "Samuel, you are not that old, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I need you to know that every single day of these past 25 years has been a gift. Every morning I wake up next to you, every sunset we watch together, every laugh and tear and moment we have shared, all of it has been more than I ever dreamed possible. You took my life and filled it with meaning and joy. You gave me children and grandchildren and a legacy I am proud of. But more than that, you gave me love. Real, deep, lasting love. And whatever time we have left, whether it is another 25 years or just 25 days, I want you to know that I have loved you with everything I have, and I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you talking like this? Are you ill? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I am just old enough now to know that time is precious, that we should not wait to say the important things." Samuel cupped her face in his weathered hands. "I love you, Rebecca Delaney. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, and I thank God for that snowstorm that brought you into my life." "I love you too," Rebecca whispered. "More than I can ever find words to say. You saved my life that day, Samuel, but you did more than that. You gave me a life worth living. You showed me what love should be, what partnership means, what it is to build something lasting. You are my heart, Samuel Delaney, and I will love you forever." They kissed as the snow fell outside, soft and quiet, and Rebecca felt the circle close. Snow had brought them together, and here they were, surrounded by snow again, still in love, still grateful, still building their life together one day at a time. Samuel lived another 10 years, active and engaged until nearly the end, finally passing peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1910, at the age of 73. Rebecca held his hand as he drew his last breath, whispering to him about hope starting here, about how grateful she was for every moment they had shared, about how she would carry his love with her until they met again. She grieved him deeply, but she did not let grief consume her. She had too much to live for: children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a ranch that still needed managing, a community that still needed her. She kept the evening ritual of watching the sunset, sometimes alone, sometimes surrounded by family, always remembering the man who had taught her about hope. Rebecca lived to be 80 years old, dying peacefully in 1926, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Samuel had created. In her final moments, as the world grew dim and distant, she thought she saw him waiting for her, strong and young again, reaching out his hand just as he had done in that snow so many years ago. "Hope starts here," he said, smiling, and Rebecca took his hand and went home. The ranch continued for generations after them, passed down through Tommy's line, each generation adding their own chapters to the story. But they always remembered Samuel and Rebecca, the couple who had built it all from nothing, whose love story had started in despair and grown into legend. On the wall of the ranch house, in the main room where everyone gathered, hung a simple wooden plaque with words carved deep into the grain: "Hope starts here." Visitors often asked about it, and whoever answered would smile and tell the story of Rebecca in the snow, of Samuel appearing like an answer to prayer, of how love and hope could transform everything if you were brave enough to believe. And every winter, when the rare snow fell on the California hills, the family would gather and remember, would tell the story again for the youngest generation, would honor the love that had built their legacy. They would talk about choosing hope even in the darkest moment, about the power of kindness, about how one person offering help to another could ripple outward through time, creating waves of good that lasted long after the original actors had gone. The Delaney Ranch stood as a testament to what two people could build when they believed in each other, when they chose love over fear, hope over despair, together over alone. And though the world changed around it, though the Wild West became tamed and civilized, though the 20th century brought automobiles and airplanes and technologies undreamed of in Samuel and Rebecca's time, that core truth remained constant. Hope starts here. In the moment you choose to believe, in the hand extended in friendship, in the leap of faith toward love, in the decision to build rather than destroy, to trust rather than fear, to hope rather than despair. Samuel and Rebecca's story lived on, not just in the family that carried their legacy, but in everyone who heard it and took its lesson to heart. They had been ordinary people who faced extraordinary circumstances and chose to respond with courage and love. They had taken the worst moment of Rebecca's life and transformed it into the foundation of everything good that followed. And in the end, was that not what all the best love stories were? Not fairy tales of perfect people living perfect lives, but real people choosing each other again and again, building something lasting through commitment and work and unwavering faith in each other. Rebecca and Samuel had been tested by circumstance, by drought and hardship, by the normal struggles of life, and they had come through it all stronger, their love deeper for having been forged in the fire of real life. Their children grew old telling their story. Their grandchildren passed it on to their own children. And each generation understood a little better that love was not something that just happened to you, but something you chose, something you worked for, something you built deliberately and carefully over years and decades of daily decisions to show up, to care, to try. Hope starts here, Samuel had said in that snow, and he had been talking about more than just physical survival. He had been talking about emotional survival, about spiritual survival, about the choice to keep believing in goodness and possibility even when the world seemed determined to teach you cynicism and despair. Rebecca had taken that hope and turned it into a life. She had been the girl crying in the snow with no hope left, and she had become the woman who raised a family, built a legacy, and loved so deeply that her story inspired generations. She had been saved by Samuel's kindness, but she had saved herself too, by choosing to believe him, by working to build the life he offered, by never giving up on the hope that had started in that snowstorm. And was that not the real lesson? That we save each other, yes, but we also have to save ourselves. That hope is both offered and chosen. That love is both found and created. That the best stories are the ones where people become their best selves by believing in each other. Samuel and Rebecca Delaney had lived that truth every day of their marriage. They had shown through their actions that real love was not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations, though they had those too. Real love was about showing up every day, about choosing patience over anger, about building together rather than tearing apart, about creating something that lasted. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death separating them for a time. But the love they built did not end. It lived on in their descendants, in the ranch they had created, in the lessons they had taught, in the example they had set. It lived on in anyone who heard their story and felt inspired to choose hope, to extend kindness, to believe in the possibility of love transforming everything. Hope starts here, with you, with me, with every person who chooses to believe that tomorrow can be better than today, that strangers can become family, that love can grow in the most unlikely places if we are brave enough to nurture it. Rebecca Lancaster, who had been so certain she was going to die alone in the snow, instead lived a long, full life surrounded by people who loved her. She went from having nothing to having everything that mattered. She went from despair to joy, from isolation to connection, from fear to love. And it all started with a cowboy who appeared through a snowstorm and offered her the most precious gift anyone can give another person: hope. Hope that things could get better. Hope that she mattered. Hope that her story was not over but just beginning. Samuel Delaney had been the kind of man who backed up his words with actions. He said hope starts here, and then he proved it by taking Rebecca home, by giving her safety and respect, by falling in love with her and building a life with her. He had not just saved her from the snow. He had saved her from a life of loneliness and despair. And in doing so, she had saved him right back from a life that was successful but empty, productive but lonely. They had needed each other, those two strangers meeting in a snowstorm, though neither fully understood it at the time. They had been the answer to prayers they had not known they were praying. And they had been wise enough, brave enough, to recognize the gift they had been given and to nurture it into something extraordinary. That was their legacy. Not just the ranch, not just the family, but the proof that love could grow anywhere, that hope could bloom in the harshest conditions, that two people committed to each other could build something that lasted for generations. As the sun set on the final page of their story, as the last chapter closed on Rebecca's long and beautiful life, the truth remained clear and unshakable. Hope starts here, always, in every moment, in every choice, in every heart brave enough to believe it. And the story of Samuel and Rebecca Delaney lived on, a testament to that eternal truth, inspiring everyone who heard it to choose hope, to offer kindness, to believe in love, and to remember that the darkest moment can become the brightest beginning if we are brave enough to reach out, to accept help, to trust in the possibility of something better. Hope starts here. It always has. It always will.